So today our workshop is titled Beyond the DORA Frameworks, and we're really focusing today on, practical data-driven engineering. Like how do you use data to become better as an engineering organization? Because that's really the goal that we have to whenever we're looking at metrics or things like that. So very fortunate today to be joined by Luca Rossi from Refactoring and Yishai Biri, who's the CTO at Linear B. And with that, I will let the two of you take this away. Like, what are we going to talk about today?
Thank you, Ben, for having me, first of all. Today we are going to talk about the report that we have been running together. It's a combined effort from the refactoring community and the Linear B community. It's this survey that we have run through about 350 engineers and managers about good practices and how engineering teams use data and metrics to improve. So happy to have Ishai to comment these things together, and so excited to get through it.
Yeah, I'm always excited to talk about what we learn from people, practitioners, leaders, team leads that talk or respond to questions about how they do things, what works for them, where they are successful, how they use data. So I think there's a lot of gems here, and excited to drill into this.
All right, well, awesome. With that said, let's dive in a little bit and talk about what went into this report.
Yeah, so we had as we have written, about 350 responses from, I would say mostly people in tech, but we are happy to get opinions also from marketing managers and some folks who felt they had to answer the survey anyway. But it was perfect parity almost between software engineers and engineering manager roles. And I mean, even when it comes to the distribution of size of companies, this matches pretty much what we have seen in other surveys and reports that we have run between small companies and big companies, with about one engineer out of five coming from companies with more than 500 engineers. And maybe what's most interesting is the work setup breakdown. Because the vast majority of respondents have some work remotely in some capacity, with only 11% pretty much working full-time in an office. And we have more insights on that later and how that correlates with how they work, but I don't want to spoil it.
Awesome. Well, let's start diving into this. Maybe with our first insight, which I think, really, if people are going to take anything away from this session today, I think this slide here really does a great job summarizing it. So what are we looking at here with these 3 points?
Yeah, so I would like to illustrate the points and then maybe ask Ishai's take on that, if it resonates with his own experience or not. I mean, we have gone into this data analysis of survey answers with eyes wide open and trying not to bring our own bias into this, and just try to find the traits that are the most correlated with the highest number of best practices and good qualities that we could find in a team, and where these correlations were the strongest. And there are three clear winners, which are the ones that we have mentioned in the slides. That is, when you look at teams that seem to do the most things well, there are all teams that get very high scores in engineers being happy about their development practices, where engineering is well regarded among leadership and stakeholders who are not engineers, non-technical. And last but not least, projects ship on time. Can you believe it? These are the three things that resonated the most, apparently. So what do you think, Ishai?
So I want to start with the last one, and I've been talking with hundreds of leaders of engineering organizations, typically larger ones with hundreds of engineers, and there's a almost uniform message: the business needs predictability more than it
Yes.
needs raw output or velocity. Um, do a little less, but do it on time, or let me know if it's coming on time or if I should change my plans. Is almost a unison kind of a message. There are so many things that we can do agile when building them, but we still have to have some waterfall when delivering them to the world, as in enabling sales or creating campaigns around new capabilities, pricing. There's so much work that happens after tech that
Yeah.
is that needs enough of a heads up, um, which is why I think businesses totally prefer predictability. So projects like shipping on time is a hallmark of successful engineering organizations, even if they haven't optimized entirely every single bit out of their work.
I totally agree, and I think this is a trait that sometimes get lost in conversation among other things who certainly are very important. Like we talk all the time about shipping fast. We talk about being agile and being able to steer the ship fast. But as you say, I mean, these many times these are things that matter a lot to engineers and technical stakeholders, while non-technical business people, non-technical people care a lot about predictability way more than many engineers realize. And I'm happy that these traits showed up, because I think they provide kind of a holistic picture, because it's important that engineers are happy about their development practices, but it's not enough, or we cannot close ourselves in our wallet garden happy to build tech for the sake of it. It's important that others agree with us that engineering is doing great work, and so it's well regarded. And I think project shipping on time is kind of the marriage between these two parts of the organization.
Yeah, I also think um, for the non-tech stakeholders, it's very hard to judge whether engineering is effective or producing enough. There's no like standard for how much value
Yeah.
can an engineering team produce. So it's always a gut feeling. Are we getting enough? Should we be getting more value out of this, the people and the resources that we put into engineering? But is it on time is very easy for anyone to judge. So
Yes.
that becomes the like the yardstick. Whereas, is this effective? Maybe it's 85%, maybe it's 87. Who hard for even the experts to know. For the non-tech
Yes.
people, it's almost like a black box, which is
Yes.
why looking at consistently shipping on time um, as a measure, and I think that's also like in kind of a circle that leads to well-regarding engineering, right? If they're shipping on time and I can rely on them, I'm gonna feel that this is a great team, and you get this circle of yeah, engineering feels well regarded.
Totally. And I think it's about conveying the feeling that you are in control. You set commitments and you uphold them, and it's that's what people appreciate, and what builds trust over
Yes.
time. And more trust means you're given more scope to do bigger things, and to let engineering do bigger things, and that makes engineering better regarded. And it's, as you said, I think it's a virtuous cycle.
Yep, totally agree.
Yeah, so let's look at some of the supporting data behind this. So, one of my favorite aspects of this report that you've produced for us, Luca, is just all of the detail that you've given us. So, like, let's talk about how these three things that we just discussed actually impact teams. So, what are you seeing in the data?
Yeah, basically, what you're saying is that what we ask it to people is just how much they agree or do not agree with those statements. So, engineering being well regarded, or engineers being happy about development practices, and how frequently projects shipping on time, from always to less than 20% of the time. And it was incredible to see how strong of a gradient the various answers create with respect to other good traits of a team. So if you look at the slide, you look at other traits like engineers feeling they have enough focus time, they're spending time as it was planned, They don't need to wait for others. Again, they're happy with the development practices. This is all very strongly correlated. So again, I mean, the disclaimer is that with correlation, you never know where's causation, where's the direction, right, of the correlation, what's downstream or what's upstream. But these traits are really the most correlated with the and the strongest correlated with the highest number of other good traits.
Yeah, I see like a great pattern here, like specifically caught my eye, the focus time and waiting for others. And a lot of them are there's a lot of little relationship between them, because if I have to wait for others, then when they finally get back to me, or like that wait ended, that's gonna almost certainly break my focus or cause a context switch or increase the cost of a context switch for me. So if I'm chasing someone down and it had to wait a week, I'm gonna jump on that response, and there goes my focus time. So not like focus time, there's other things affecting that, but I think there's a strong relationship between waiting for others and feeling that I don't have to chase things and having focus time.
Yes, exactly. And I think it all ties back to this kind of predictability angle. And in this case, it's about predictability of how you are spending your time. And so focus time and no need to wait for others means you can lay out a plan of what you need to do and how you will be doing that without setbacks. And it also shows in one of this, maybe the strongest correlation of all, at the bottom, when you see the correlation between projects shipping, whether they ship on time or not, and how often people spend time as it was planned. And you see that people who say that projects always ship on time spend like 70% of their time as it was planned, compared to the bottom of the survey, which is only like slightly above 30%. So it's an incredible gradient, but it's completely understandable, because when is it that projects do not ship on time? When you have to put out fires, when there are things you didn't foresee, when there are setbacks, when planning doesn't really work. And so all of this ends up making you spend time in ways that were not planned.
Yeah, the plan always looks great until you start.
I think there's a good boxing quote in there somewhere
Yeah.
too. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for providing all that great detail about what the survey has pulled up, particularly for these three high level points. And at this point now, I think we're going to transition a little more into some of the brass tacks behind this, and that brings us to our second insight, which are the successful practices that we see correlated with teams that perform very well. So we'll dive into each one of these individually, but I wonder, Luca, Yashai, do you have any observations at a high level or general summaries of what we see here as successful practices?
So I will just comment on the survey itself, like the methodology. That is, this relates to a part of the survey where we asked people about how they do certain things. Like the previous part was more like, how do you feel about this and that? I mean, how happy you are about this or that. While there was a part of the survey that was specifically about practices, like what's your work setup, how frequently you ship code. I mean, how frequently are you able to review code? Do you intentionally allocate engineering time or not? And so we tried to correlate some of these to the positive feelings and positive traits that we found in the previous slides. So as for this recap, Ishai, do you think is this surprising in any way, or are these things you could expect?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised. These are expected. I think they like almost neatly fall into kind of two types of practices, and I think they complement each other. One set of practices is about the way I plan and the way I prepare for success. So clear requirements or intentional allocation of engineering time, and even something about the work environment, the flexibility, the physical conditions, all of that. These are all things that are part of increasing the chances that my plan will work, right? I'm preparing up front. And then the other two, and I think they have to go hand in hand, are about the our ability to adjust. So frequent code shipping and quick PR reviews, they don't only save me time and context switches and so on. There's a lot of direct benefits, but they also directly affect my ability to course correct, like micro corrections during the day, during the week, during the sprint, during the quarter. I
Yeah.
can respond to, I mean, every plan is perfect until I get punch in the face. Uh, Life will do that to me every sprint or every project. The way I can respond and change a bit or do something a little different in the next pull request is my way to actually meet most of my plan. So dealing with the surprises is all about short cycles, shipping code frequently so I can learn that I actually build the wrong thing and customers hate it and I have to change something. I didn't think about a flow. These are all things that come from a bit like the um, fast cycles. And I think together they give me the ability to be successful.
Completely agree.
Awesome. Awesome. So let's start diving into some of the details on these then. And let's start with the remote flexibility and work setup, which is the first practice that we'll focus on. So, there's one very big outlier here when you look at how companies are based, in terms of office-based, hybrid, remote. What's going on here? Like, what are we seeing with this data?
Luca,
Yeah.
maybe
So
remind us just in geographies, like who did we talk with?
yeah,
This is
so
the
the
US.
geography, so a little bit more context on this was pretty much spread out. So there are like 25 people from the US, 25 from India, 30% from Europe, and the rest from the rest of the world. And what you're seeing here, these scores are on a scale from 1 to 5. And so it's qualitative answers. It's an average of what engineers replied about how happy they are with their practices, how feel they don't need to wait for others versus they need to, or do they feel they have enough focus time, etc. So we also surveyed them about their work setup, from people who spend 100% of the time at the office to people who are hybrid and people who are full remote, actually trying to split between those who are full remote, but the company has an office where somebody's going, and people who are full remote and there is no office, so it's completely remote first. And as you can see, there is no like discernible the difference between the last three. I mean, the hybrid and full remote setups. I mean, there are ups and downs, but it's hard to find correlations. While it's pretty clear that engineers who go all the time in an office, they fare worse on several measures. They're generally less happy about their practices, and they deliver on time less often than others, and they also need to wait more often for others. So it seems that you don't necessarily need to go full blown remote and 100%, but some remote capacity definitely helps engineers doing the best work.
Yeah, and at least there's a strong correlation with how engineers feel.
Yeah.
Even if they're able to get the focus time or spend their time as planned, roughly in the same areas, uh, they're not as happy. That's pretty obvious.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So let's move on to the next practice, which is actually one of my favorite, which might be a little weird to say, and that's intentionally allocating engineering time. So this is kind of a generic phrase. So maybe we can
Yes.
start by describing what do we mean when we say that organizations are intentionally allocating their time.
Yes, we try to make the phrasing a little bit more precise on the survey. The idea here is that there are teams who upfront decide to split and allocate the engineering time across different dimensions. and categories. You can think of maintenance or keep the lights on, somebody calls it like that, or versus new features versus improvements. I mean, there are, of course, many kinds of categorization, but there is like a broad difference between people who decide to spend the same amount of time on something or every time versus those who just on an opportunistic level decide every time what's the best. Okay, and it seems that people who intentionally allocate time across different dimensions, so always the same way, have a benefit, have a strong benefit in terms of predictability, so projects delivered on time, happiness about development practices, time spent as planned, even more focused time. So this was a strong correlation, and probably the biggest difference is about maintenance. I mean, the way teams also looking at qualitative answers, and so free answers given by people. Looking at what they replied is sometimes as simple as saying 20% of our time always goes to maintenance. Okay, up down to the most sophisticated versions of these, like we want to separate time from new projects, improvements, productivity, KTLO, but maybe you don't have to go into all of that. And it's just good to just save some time for KTLO and you already get some benefits.
Yeah, I think a hidden benefit here is, this begins with understanding or deciding that it's important to have these categories and to not just allocate forward, but also understand what's currently happening. Where are we actually spending our time? You can't make good decisions about this if you don't know how much or roughly how much you're spending on each of these, or even deciding that it matters, that there is some merit in understanding how much of our engineering time goes to keeping the lights on or creating new value and so on. So, and this is something that I'm seeing, again, very common among our larger customers. You start with no visibility. No one even knows. We may have a gut feeling. Then you start with doing some, like laying down some infrastructure and capabilities and tooling and mindshare to start caring about these things and start tagging work, or there's a bunch of methods to do this. So now senior management all the way down to teams can understand how much of my time is actually going towards the maybe non-interesting or non-revenue generating or keeping the lights on, all of these.
Yes.
And after seeing that, should we change it? What should we do to, like, are we happy with this, with the actuals? Should we change them? And if so, how? And what I'm learning here is that even just starting by being intentional about it, you haven't fixed anything. You're just intentional about knowing what's happening and having a goal in itself correlates highly with other great practices and outcomes like the focus time or delivery on time.
I completely agree, and I think that is also shown. I mean, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but there is another part about how people use engineering metrics and tools that measure various parts of the development process. And this is one of the areas. I mean, measuring how you're allocating engineering time, whether or not you're intentional about it. I mean, as you said, you can just measure things and get an objective picture of where your time goes before getting intentional about it, and that's already so useful, even just to have grounded
It's like a
conversation.
small step in being intentional because it means you care. You're not completely oblivious to that question.
Exactly, totally agree.
Right.
Yeah, little intentionality can go a long ways, I feel like. And, another thing that every organization has and should be intentional about are the requirements that they set for their team. So again, similar to the last one, like let's start by explaining what do we mean when teams have clear requirements and what are the impact that we're seeing when they do so?
So of course, this is one of those traits that it's hard to say whether it's downstream a number of good practices around good collaboration and people working well together, or whether instead it's upstream where you decide you have to spend more time on getting requirements right. So it's just something that apparently, for the thing that you can say from the data is that engineers care about this a lot. And you can see this from the things that it is correlated with. And it's totally understandable because, I mean, when you don't have clear requirements, at least in my experience, that means you have back and forth with other people, and that leads to waiting for others, leads to less focused time, more meetings because you didn't get the things right, or you didn't get the things in a way that engineers can actually do their work. So that's how I read it.
I mean, I think requirements are the bane of developers, like unclear requirements or the gaps there. Uh, Huge unsolved problem in our space. I think Gen AI will make it even worse in many ways. We can dive into that. Um, but yeah, the numbers to me, they scream. Developers deeply care about this. It messes them up in many ways when the requirements are not clear and they have to work on something and then get more answers, more like start unraveling that thread. There's no way I can ship on time or deliver or even plan if I don't know what I need to build. Um, and they are getting frustrated by that. I mean, that's the number one thing I've been hearing for over 20 years in different settings and in dev teams and hearing developers saying, yeah, the requirement was not clear or it changed. I started working on it and then realized there's so much here that's not even um, decided on or communicated in a way that I can work with. Don't hear this as me saying that only the people writing requirements are to blame, but this interface between what typically is product management and engineering, or the people writing requirements and the people implementing them, creates a lot of pain.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think there are many ways you can solve this part of the process, but it's important that you can make like engineers to own more, scope of the requirements, being more autonomous on this, or you can work more top down with the PM having more impact. But it's important to be intentional, I think, on how this happens and how you get this done. And this probably doesn't get as much attention as other parts of the development process, if you ask me. But I hope that looking at the data, we can go back home and reflecting on how we create this.
Yeah, I also think in many cases this hides other problems. So, there are teams where developers are part of creating the requirements. There's a lot of
Yep.
tickets or stories where they are technical stories that engineering owns end to end. But it's like always easy to blame the requirements when things go like sour. So, it to me is sometimes a blanket kind of reason for things, and it hides design issues. It hides um, sometimes we don't really know what we want, or we know what we want, but then we discover the customer wants a different thing. So
Yeah.
there's a lot here, but it's all about what we should be building.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's not evident until we build it.
I agree.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah, and I feel like it's hard for people to get excited about setting good requirements, but you could almost do the opposite of this slide, right? And have it be a very terrifying slide where if you have uncertainty, things are just going to go horribly for your team, and that would suddenly, I think, get a lot of motivation. But one thing that I think is very easy to both track, but also to help your teams improve is our next successful practice, and that's shipping code often. Like it feels like we've said this over and over again in various formats here at Linear B. But again, it shows up as like yet another thing that teams really should be focused on. So, what are we seeing with teams that ship code faster?
Well, I think this is one of the least surprising correlations because I think we are hammering on this topic a lot in recent years because the data is just everywhere. There are people who ship often, teams who ship often um, perform better, and top performers ship code more often. So the correlation goes both ways, because I think shipping more often also means that when there is a mistake, you recover faster from mistake. And so counterintuitively, when you think about it, more speed also brings more stability in many cases, because you get you recover faster from issues. So nothing surprising here, in my opinion. But I also want to hear from Ishai.
Yeah, so I think like the lore is that we should be able to ship very often, all the way to continuous. Developers are obviously happier when things are, when they're in that state. I think not just because the typical developers want to get their job done and take some joy in seeing their code actually serving customers and not just sitting there in the code base. Um, I think to get to a point where you can deploy or ship code multiple times a day, you will have you needed to solve a lot of things that make developers frustrated. You need to solve the build pipelines. You need to have good tests, so it's not
Yes.
an endless chase about quality. You need to solve communication between people to get those PR reviews. So there's a lot of things you need to solve to be able to just do to even get there, which all create a better developer experience and make developers happier. Um, I think if I look at the data a bit more closely, it looks like in some places the middle row is better, or at least not like
Yeah,
dramatically
not worse.
worse than. And I think in those cases, what to me this reads, and that's my just uneducated guess, if I'm looking at what it means to deploy or ship code multiple times a week versus multiple times a day, and if we haven't figured it out completely, full automation, everything is like completely like clockwork, multiple times a day can be hard, can be
Yes.
detracting from my focus time because it's like everything everywhere all at once. So if I'm looking at that point, focus time may take a hit until we've completely mastered some of those skills for delivering continuously. Um, and I think where we're not seeing the big jump in other metrics between few times a week and multiple times a day is where the teams are still getting everything sorted out or ironed out to be
Yeah.
able to smoothly ship code multiple times a day, sometimes, dozens or more times a day. And then they're happy across the board and the focus time is not hit. They spend time as planned and so on.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about your comment about the middle row sometimes performing better. I think the reason is that this is a measure that works when it's like, as you said, downstream, the good practices of your team that put together allow you to ship faster, but it's not something you can impose. That is, it's not like you magically improve if today you tell your team you have to ship multiple times a day, because if the all the parts of the process are not ready, then you're creating more chaos, more manual work, more QA, more bugs. So in here there is probably hidden. I mean, we are putting together teams who are probably very mature and they're seeing way more benefit versus those who try maybe to ship fast, but they're also having issues. And so we are not seeing like this correlation as strong as it might be for top performers, for example.
Great. And that brings us to our very last successful practice that we've identified that I think is very, very tightly coupled with shipping code often, and that is having a short-lived PR. Like, from our experience, we've seen that pull requests, the code review tends to be the biggest bottleneck for most organizations. But it really like it's the impact of that seems to extend well beyond just shipping code faster. So what are we seeing with organizations that have shorter lived PRs?
So this was some of the most interesting patterns we have found in the survey, and I wanted to pick Ishai's brain on this because we didn't find great differences in across pretty much all measures between teams that reported to take 1 hour to close a PR to 1 day, let's say. But it made a lot of difference when the PR took just minutes, maybe because the team is pairing, or because the teammates are ready to pick up the PR immediately. And so among good things, and then in the bad way, the teams that take days to close a PR. So I have my opinion on that, but I wanted to hear from Ishai.
Yeah, I think this is very interesting. I'll start with what I think is the easier part, which is the crossing the day threshold.
Yeah,
And thinking about how we work, the fact that we have work and then home or family, or like there's night we sleep. The um, getting back to something I've started yesterday, and I received a review today or in a couple days. This is always a very cold start.
yeah,
The context switch, just understanding, okay, what did I actually mean in this code? And I have to like relearn things. Typically over that kind of time range, I will have started something else. So I'm like already have a higher whip, I'm juggling more things, and I have to get back to something which I've put aside and get back to it. So I think that is what, like, when you cross the single day, and we also have we've shown in research that once things cross the day threshold, they will be slower in the next
yeah,
phases as well. Like everything is going to be slower about them. Um, so I think that's why there's like this very distinct difference between crossing the day threshold.
yeah,
If I manage to get my work done in the day, I'm going home with a kind of a sense of accomplishment. I've completed things, and you know the dopamine rush that you get when you tick a box out of something.
yes,
Um, and if I'm like leaving for home, or trying to fall asleep and thinking about the open things, I can see why all of these add up to all of these like bad feelings. On the flip
yeah,
side, when you are in the zone and in the flow and the things are like going like this, and it's almost like an immediate response. I start something, get response. Typically, if it's a few minutes, I probably don't have to rewrite my PR. Everything looks
yeah,
good. I can merge it. Everything is green. I mean, like in the green lane, or think about, I don't know the English term. You go on the street and you have those like series of green lights. It's like
yeah.
a green wave or something. It feels great, and everything now feels that like it's going well. Um, I think these are all very obvious edges to
Yeah,
me.
yeah, I agree, and I think the stark difference between like minutes and 1 hour, which then it's not very different from, let's say, half a day, is that when it takes 1 hour, then if it takes 1 hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, anyway, you have to context switch to other tasks. It's not like
Yes.
you're waiting 1 hour for that to happen. And so when you are already paying the cost of switching to other tasks, then I mean, if I am the submitter of the PR, if it takes 2 hours or 4 hours, it doesn't change much for me. I'm doing other things, then I'm going back to the PR and seeing what happens, if I have to rewrite something or not. The only difference is where I don't have to switch on other things. If I keep being focused on the task because the review is kind of sync, or I don't need that because we did pair programming, or maybe it's non-blocking or whatever, and you get this minutes workflow, then I think it makes a complete difference between, because then maybe I follow the release, the deployment, I follow the code in production. If there are any issues, I keep the ownership of the full process without having to switch to other things. So I think that's the difference. I think it's also dangerous to look at this data, because I'm looking at some of the comments and think that you have to impose or set targets about taking minutes to do PRs, because that's not how it works. I mean, it should be like downstream the good things that you have set up, because otherwise, of course, if you're imposing top down that PRs should take minutes to get done, of course you will get rushed reviews or no reviews at all. The infamous looks good to me. And
Or
so
you're
that's not how we get there.
interrupting someone else. So they
Yes.
pay an expensive context switch just so you can move on. Yeah, but
Yes.
I totally agree. You've solved things like working on smaller PRs, um, small like small whip, removed review bottlenecks, and that will cause more of your PRs to go very fast. Not all of
Yeah.
them, but enough that you get this feeling that most things can flow.
Yes.
And this brings us to our final insight for this report, and that is that the role of metrics within engineering organizations. So, we've seen a growing trend of engineering organizations really focusing in on certain metrics. We mentioned DORA metrics in the title of this session. So, what are we seeing among engineering organizations that track metrics versus those that don't?
Yeah. So one thing that I want to mention also, which is not reported here, is that we ran similar service in the past. So we also ask people whether they track metrics or not. And what we are seeing is that there is a clear trend where teams are tracking metrics more and more. So, I mean, from year over year, it's like up 30%. So now it's about 50% of teams track metrics. 1 year before was way less than that. And I think if you look at the data, it shows why, because many of these traits and practices and measures that we have mentioned are things that if you don't measure them, you can never be sure you're really improving on those. I mean, data is like the ground level that I allow all these practices to build on, because then you can have good conversations based on objective reality that you're seeing things getting better or worse. So that's my interpretation. And of course, I want to know from Ishai, you guys work on metrics all the time, but I think the result is clear.
Yeah, so first of all, we definitely see this ongoing increase in adoption of engineering metrics year over year for years. It's definitely there. Um, it's becoming obvious for more and more of the dev leaders that you just have to have those. What I'm getting from these numbers, and I think that's a very encouraging insight. There's a lot of talk. There's always, I think it's not going away about metrics being abused or used to stack rank developers. There are famous cases where the wrong metrics are used, or in general, people are sometimes apprehensive about, oh, I'm being measured. Am I like a lab mouse in a on a wheel? Um, and this correlation tells me that at least in most places, the metrics are used in the positive way of finding and unblocking like finding the bottlenecks, unblocking the teams, giving the teams the tools they need um, to be more successful, and not to punish developers or to single
Yeah,
out the like your it's not about your performance. It is about how blocked are you. Is the
yeah,
environment and the practices, are they blocking you from delivering more? So if the like people are able to deliver more when metrics are being used, it's because someone was effective about using those to actually unblock things. If they're happier with their practices, this is telling me that no one is using or mostly are not using those metrics against the developers, but actually helping them to improve the practices. Um, so I find this very encouraging. And it tells me that when you actually look at the numbers or what people are saying and feeling, um, those engineer metrics are put to good use.
yeah. I completely agree, and I also think looking at the qualitative parts of the survey, when we asked people how they used metrics, challenges, and benefits, then people who were concerned about some of the things that you said about developers thinking management is measuring them through metrics and being targeted. Uh, it's in teams that already have kind of low trust in management. There is already, it's kind of a low trust team already. And then it's not that metrics are a bad device. It's about how you use them. And when it's a high trust situation, people trust they're being used for good. When it's low trust, they don't trust the metrics as well. But metrics by themselves, I think they are like foundational tool to understand, first of all, even before I see someone in the chat mentioning the good hard low measures becoming not good targets. I think there is a whole lot of work you can do before setting any target. I mean, just looking at data, seeing the trends, seeing things trending right or trending wrong, backing good conversations, you can get incredible benefit without putting metrics into your OKRs or setting any kind of target.
Yeah, and I think having engineering metrics means or probably says that the organization cares, someone cares
Yes.
about how engineering is doing and how engineering like are they fully equipped and to and unblocked basically. Um and again, I'm very encouraged by these numbers.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up Goodhart's Law, Luca, because I saw that comment too, and I was like, we gotta make sure that gets addressed, you know. So, well, wonderful. And you know, and like I mentioned at the top of this session, you know, our goal here is to help everyone come away with practical advice on how to put this stuff into action. So we've talked about a lot of great practices, some great you know, insights that we've learned from this survey, but now I want to take a moment to just talk about this pyramid of engineering maturity that you've come up with, Luca. So
Yeah.
explain what this means and how our audience can take this away today and do something valuable with it.
Yes, this is my own take on how to take some of the strongest points from the survey and trying to make them actionable. So it's not necessarily some kind of correlation that comes out of the survey, but this is something I really believe in. Looking at looking at the answers, both quantitative and qualitative. That is, there are like 3 levels of things that help engineering teams get better in maturity. And it all starts with implementing a level of transparency that allows people to get good feedback loop, track data that matters, discuss bottlenecks. There were so many answers of people commenting on good practices they have, good retrospective, discussing what works and what does not work in the team. Whether or not you do that with metrics on other devices, just make sure you discuss problems and you work towards doing things better. And once you have this in place, then you can work with intent. You know, if you have a good feedback loop in place, you can decide to intentionally allocate engineering times, to intentionally spend times on good requirements because that's what you believe you need. You set improvement goals and so on. And finally, like the peak of the pyramid to me is getting things faster. So as we discussed with the Shai, uh, elite teams are fast, but fast teams are not necessarily elite. So speed alone doesn't necessarily get you farther, even if it for sure it helps on a on a large scale of things. But it's important that you increase your speed when you are in control of the things you're doing. So you have good feedback loop, you are in control of measures, and you are intentional about how you're doing things. So this is how I see it.
Yeah, I love this, and I think um, when thinking about speed, we don't mean the like running like crazy. It's not about how fast you run. It's about how often, like making shorter steps, if you like, or cycling faster. Having the short cycles that allow you to course correct and learn from every single step. That is the kind of speed that we need, and combining that with the intent. And I'm looking here not just about intending, like intent about improving, but that part of our life is planning. We plan a sprint, we plan the day, we plan a project, and then we have the speed that allows us to adjust and respond to the unplanned stuff, all those surprises. Having a healthy combination of those will increase my chances of delivering on time. Will actually remove some wasted time when in those context switches and mental cycles going just to, you know, when working on big batches or waiting for others for a long time. We talked about the pull requests across the day limit and so on. But that combination, that's the magic happens when you have a good plan and you're fast enough on
Yeah.
your feet to respond. Because again, thinking of boxing, look at their feet, right? They're always moving. That gives them
Yes.
stability. They're like, look at those
Dynamic.
robots, those bots and robots that like walk. They move their feet very fast. Like
Yeah.
even in place, it creates that stability, and that's your stability to deliver on time, even when reality is different than the plan.
We'll steal this analogy like 100%.
Yeah, I was gonna say I love that analogy. You know, personally, I'm a trail runner, so like one thing you learn quickly in trail running is quick feet. So like you have
Yeah.
to be able to respond immediately. Doesn't make you faster, but it does make you more responsive.
Yeah. So you go downhill or there's some rocks, you start like
Hmm.
really fast on your feet. It creates the stability. And in engineering, it's about delivering like very small items all the time, very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. That's all the insights that we have for this session today. I hope everyone that joined us today is coming away with something that they're going to be able to implement in your daily life and help your engineering team be more effective. Signing up for this workshop, you should have already received the report in your email inbox. If not, it's on our website now. We're Linear B. We're a company that can help your engineering organization implement a lot of the practices that we discussed here today. So I encourage you, if you're not familiar with us, or if you are familiar with us and you haven't checked us out in a while, head over to our website and start your engineering metrics journey today and be one of those teams that we're talking about that is highly respected and delivers predictably on time and has happy developers. We really want to help organizations like you achieve that. So Luca, Yashai, thank you so much for coming out today. Is there any final thoughts that you want to share with our audience before we leave?
On my side, I really love to do this work together. I love the conversations we had, looking through the numbers. I think this is a very relevant topic. So really happy to have had this chat. Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Ishai.
Yeah, thank you both. This was great. Great conversation, great insights. It was fun.
All right, awesome. Well,
Thank you.
thank you everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.